June 21, 1991. Powder River County, Montana. The call reached Vera Halcomb before the sun had cleared the low ridges east of her house. She was already awake. Already dressed. Already halfway through a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm while she studied a grease-smudged parts invoice at her kitchen table. Vera was 58 years old, and nobody in the county could remember a morning when she had slept later than dawn. The voice on the phone was Leon Markham's. Leon ran cattle on the neighboring lease, and knew old iron the way preachers know scripture. He was not a dramatic man. If he called before breakfast, it meant there was a reason. "Vera," he said, "you know that wash on the Densmore ground, the one under the broken windmill road?" Vera knew it. Everybody did. That wash cut through a quarter-mile of neglected ranch track that nobody had graded properly since the Eisenhower years. "There's a Caterpillar D6 sitting in it," Leon said. "Nose down in the silt, half buried, looks like it's been there since Truman. But the frame's still straight. I swear to you, Vera, I think the old thing's all there." Vera set her coffee down. A D6 was not a small machine. In its day, it had been a road builder, a pasture opener. A dirt-moving brute built in an era when manufacturers assumed a machine would outlive the men making payments on it. Most of them have been worked hard, rebuilt once, worked hard again, then either cannibalized for parts or left where they finally stopped. Finding one half swallowed by a Montana wash in 1991, was like finding a freight locomotive asleep in a creek bed. "What kind of shape?" Vera asked. "The kind of shape that makes sensible people keep driving," Leon said. "Rust everywhere. Pony motor stack broken off. Brush grown through the tracks. But the castings look clean. No busted belly, no twist in the nose. I thought of you." Vera was in her truck 12 minutes later. The machine was worse than Leon had described. And better. The crawler sat at an angle in the bottom of the wash, its blade half buried in hardened silt, one track sunk deeper than the other. Grease lines hung stiff and cracked, the seat was gone, the exhaust opening on the little gasoline pony motor was packed tight with dirt, feathers, and seed husks. The hood wore a skin of dull orange rust, broken only by narrow ghosts of the old Caterpillar yellow. But the main frame was straight. Vera walked around it once without speaking. Then again, slower. She crouched by the front idler, put 2 fingers against the track link pin. Knocked her knuckles against the diesel block. Leaned over and looked at the final drive housings. Scraped away packed mud with a screwdriver from her pocket. Leon watched her. "Well?" he asked. Vera stood up and wiped the mud onto her jeans. "It's ugly," she said. Leon laughed. "Here from the road. It's not broken in the bones." That afternoon she drove to the Densmore house. Emmett Densmore was 86 and had been mostly retired for the better part of 20 years. When Vera asked about the crawler, he had to think before he remembered it. His brother had bought it used in the late 1950s to cut stock ponds and knock back cedar. Then the pony motor failed one summer. They dragged it near the wash, meant to work on it after haying, and never did. A flash flood undercut the bank a few years later, and the machine slid nose first into the channel. After that, it became part of the landscape. "Still want it?" Emmett asked. "I do. Give me $75 and haul your problem away." Vera paid him in cash. The first person to laugh was not Leon. It was Travis Wynn. Travis was 35, clean-shaven, sharp-collared, and employed by a regional equipment company out of Billings that sold modern loaders, articulated tractors, and financing packages polished enough to make debt sound respectable. For the past 18 months, he had been trying to sell Vera a low-hour track loader she neither wanted nor trusted. When he heard she had bought a dead D6 out of a wash for $75, he drove out under the excuse of checking on a quote. He found Vera in her machine shed, pressure washing 30 years of baked mud off the crawler. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at the machine. The bent grill, the empty seat pan, the track packed solid with roots and alkali clay. Then he gave a short laugh. "Vera," he said, "please tell me this is not your plan." She kept washing. "Morning, Travis. That thing is 14 tons of regret. Could be. It has been sitting in a drainage ditch for half a lifetime." She shut off the washer and looked at him. "That's not the same thing as being dead." That was the beginning of the argument, though argument was too strong a word. Travis talked the way salesmen talk when they believe the future is automatically on their side. Vera answered the way capable people answer when they have no interest in performing certainty for spectators. He pointed at the rust and saw cost. She pointed at the block and saw structure. He pointed at the collapsed controls and saw scrap. She pointed at the straight frame rails and saw possibility. He pointed at financing. She pointed at time. By the end of the week, half the county had heard about the widow on Cottonwood Creek who had paid $75 for a drowned crawler and dragged it home like a trophy from poor judgment. What most of them didn't know was that Vera Halcomb had not bought the machine out of sentiment. She had grown up in a highway maintenance camp outside Miles City. Her father rebuilt diesel heads on a wooden bench under a bare bulb. Her brothers could split a final drive before they were old enough to shave.
Was the one who learned how to look. She learned what a cracked block really looked like, how a twisted frame telegraphed itself through bag gaps, how a machine that had failed violently carried a different kind of silence than a machine that had simply been abandoned. There was a phrase her father used whenever neighbors dragged wreckage into the yard and wanted a verdict. Some machines are broken hard. Some are just stuck long. Most people, Vera had learned, could not tell the difference. The first step was cleaning. Because all useful diagnosis starts with getting the lies off the surface. She pulled the side panels, belly pans, and access covers, drained the crankcase, which produced a black rope of oil so thick it barely deserved the name, cracked the cooling jacket and got brown water, opened the pony motor and found a mouse nest built where ignition should have been. Pulled the fuel tank and discovered the diesel inside had turned into a varnished sludge with the smell of old fence posts and bad decisions. But as the filth came away, the machine became readable. The main diesel block was whole. The bell housing was clean. The nose was not sprung. The final drives showed seepage, but not fracture. The blade push arms were scarred and rusty, but true. Travis came back the following week with a binder full of numbers and the patience of a man expecting reality to do his selling for him. Vera was bent over the left steering clutch housing with a work light and a scraper when he stepped into the shed. "Tell me you haven't started buying parts." "I've started buying information," she said. He looked over the crawler. It was cleaner now, which made the damage easier to see. The pony motor was disassembled on a bench. Fuel lines were coiled in a coffee can. The driver's platform was stripped to metal. "Vera, this is how bad money disappears. One gasket set here, one injector there, a few seals, some machine work, and before long you spent 10 times what the thing is worth." Vera slid the scraper under a ribbon of dried sludge and peeled it back. "What it's worth to whom?" "To anyone." She straightened and looked at him. "That's your mistake," she said. "You keep pricing paint." The second week was where optimism usually died. The pony motor was seized. Not damaged beyond hope. Seized. Its magneto was corroded. The fuel bowl was fouled. The linkage was frozen almost solid. Worse, the main diesel would not roll through a full revolution. Vera pulled the injectors, scoped the cylinders, and found rust haze on the walls with one piston hanging stubbornly high in its bore. The left steering clutch was frozen. One track adjuster had collapsed. The hydraulic lines for the blade had cracked so completely they crumbled in her hands. Even Leon, who believed in her more than he said aloud, grew quiet when he saw the parts laid across the benches. "This may be the one that beats you," he said one evening. Vera did not answer right away. She was heating a housing with a rosebud torch, waiting for metal to expand while penetrating oil crept into places oil had not touched since Kennedy was president. "Maybe," she said. That was the dark part of the job. Not the mud, not the rust. The waiting. Every morning before daylight she stepped into the shed, checked what had loosened, and found that most of it had not. She rocked the flywheel with a bar and got nothing. She tapped a block of oak against the high piston crown and got nothing. She rebuilt the pony motor magneto and got a single blue spark that vanished as if mocking her. Travis showed up once more, this time not even pretending he had business nearby. Vera was sitting on an overturned bucket, elbows on her knees, looking at the open engine with the kind of focus that from a distance can resemble defeat. He took that as encouragement. "You know what this is now," he said softly, almost kindly. "A monument. That's all. A heavy one." Vera looked up at him. "No," she said. "It's a test." "Of what?" "Whether time did damage, or just hit it." Then she stood, wiped her hands, and went back to work. 3 days later, the first real answer came. She had been soaking the cylinders for nearly a week. That morning she set the oak block against the high piston again, hit it once with a 3-pound hammer, then once more. The piston moved. Not much. Barely enough to trust. But metal that moves can be persuaded. She worked the others after that, fraction by fraction. No heroics. No theatrical force. Just pressure, patience, release. By evening the crank turned farther than it had the day before. By the next morning it rolled almost a full revolution. The machine was talking now. After that, progress came in hard, specific steps. New fuel lines. Cleaned injector rack. Rebuild pony motor carburetor. Gasket set from a supplier in Casper. Used steering clutch discs from a salvage yard outside Sheridan. One track adjuster rebuilt on Vera's bench with seals that were close enough to work, and honest enough not to lie. She spent $640 in all, including a serviceable seat, hose stock, and the 2 hydraulic lines she could not save. Late on a July evening, with heat still trapped in the tin roof of the shed and meadowlarks gone quiet outside, Vera primed the pony motor and pulled the starter rope. The little gasoline engine coughed once. Then again. Then caught. Its sound was sharp and high and impatient, like a chainsaw trapped in a steel box. Vera let it warm, engaged the pinion, and fed the small engine into the big one. For a long second, nothing happened. Then the diesel rolled. Once. Twice. A third turned slower than the second. Then one cylinder lit. The whole machine shuddered. A cloud of black and gray smoke punched out of the stack and hit the shed roof. The diesel stumbled, barked, nearly died, then found another cylinder. And another. Vera kept one hand on the controls and listened with the full attention of a person hearing, not noise but meaning. By the 5th minute, the idle had steadied. By the 8th, the smoke had thinned. By the 10th, the old D6 was sitting in her shed producing the deep, slow pulse of a machine that had not forgotten what it was built to do. Leon was there for the first start. He grinned like a boy. Vera did not grin. She only nodded once. Starting an old machine is proof of life. It is not proof of usefulness. That was the next question. The following week she flushed the hydraulics,
adjusted the steering clutches, set the track tension, rebuilt the blade control linkage, and ran the crawler easy in the lower pasture for 2 careful afternoons. It steered, it pushed, it held temperature. It built oil pressure and kept it. The blade lifted clean, and came down without chatter. Travis heard about that, too. Stories move fast in ranch country when they contain numbers men can respect. Engine ran. Blade works. She's moving dirt with it. He still did not believe the outcome mattered. Starting a museum piece and working a machine are not the same thing. And on that narrow point, he was right. Then August came dry and mean. The bunch grass cured early, the hills went from green to gold, to something closer to paper. Every rancher in Powder River County started watching lightning the way sailors watch black water. Vera had been planning ahead of that weather. Her south range bordered rough government ground broken by cedar pockets and shale ridges. If fire ever came through there in a bad wind, it would run hard. So she put the old D6 to real work. Not show work. Ranch work. She climbed into the seat before daylight and took the crawler up along the ridge line. Blade down. Low gear. Long steady pushes through brush and topsoil. She cut a mineral strip along the fence, then another across the saddle. Then a third line wrapping the draw where fire would want to funnel uphill. The work was brutal in the way all real earthwork is brutal. Heat, vibration, dust, long hours watching 6 feet ahead while rock and cedar roots tested every pin, hose, and bearing on the machine. Modern equipment would have done it faster. Modern rental equipment would also have cost her thousands she did not have. The old D6 did not work fast. It worked all day. By the end of the first week, Vera had cut 4.5 miles of firebreak. By the middle of the second week, she had cut 11. Before September, she had also cleared 46 acres of cedar and brush that had been stealing water from 2 of her best grazing parcels for years. That was when Travis came back. He found the crawler parked above the south pasture, dust-coated, hot, and absolutely alive.
The blade edges were bright where fresh soil had polished them. Black streaks of oil and dust marked the side panels. The machine looked neither restored nor pretty. It looked useful. Below it lay the proof. A raw line of turned mineral soil carving across the hills. On one side, cured grass and cedar. On the other, protected range and cattle water. Travis got out of his truck and stood in the wind for a long moment. "How many hours?" he asked. Vera was filling a grease gun. "I didn't count hours." "How much line did you cut?" 11 miles. He looked from her to the crawler and back again. "With this? That's usually how equipment works." "Ha!" He let out a breath. Not a laugh this time, something heavier. A week later, the sky gave the question its final answer. A lightning storm crossed the county after midnight, dry strikes walking the ridge system west of Vera's lease. One of them touched down in the federal ground beyond her south fence. By dawn, a grass fire was moving through the cedar pockets with enough wind behind it to make men leave breakfast half-eaten. Neighbors came with water tanks and discs. The volunteer crew showed up. So did Vera, already in the crawler. The fire reached her cut line before it reached her pasture. There, where the blade had stripped the ground to bare mineral soil, the run broke apart. Flame dropped. Heat spread. The head lost its shape. What might have become a fast-moving range fire turned into something men with water and shovels could actually fight. By noon, it was contained. Later that afternoon Travis drove out again, not as a salesman this time, but as a man who had heard a story was now true in a way that could not be argued with. He found Vera standing beside the crawler, watching smoke lift in thin gray columns from the blackened side of the break. The protected side remained dry, dusty, and unburned. Travis looked at the line, then at the machine. "I said some foolish things," he said. Vera shrugged. "You said what you saw." "No," he said, "I said what I thought I was supposed to see." That made her look at him. He gestured toward the D6. "How did you know?"
Vera rested one hand on the side of the hood. The metal was warm from the day. You learn the difference, she said, between a machine that's dead in the castings, and a machine that's only buried in years. Travis nodded slowly. I saw rust. You saw surface. He glanced at the blackened ridge beyond the break, then back to the old crawler. And you saw load paths, castings. Where that made sense, damage that hadn't gone deep. He smiled once, without much joy in it. I sell people the future for a living. Vera's expression softened just enough to count. Then ask better questions before you tell them what it is. That story moved through Powder River County the way the best rural stories do. Not as gossip. As correction. People repeated the $75.
They repeated the 640 in parts. They repeated the 11 miles of firebreak, and the 46 acres of reclaimed ground. But what they held onto was the lesson buried under the numbers. Travis held onto it, too. He still sold equipment. That was still his job. But after that summer he stopped walking into yards assuming age was the same thing as failure. He asked what a machine was doing before he asked what year it was. He learned that pay for equipment, maintained by somebody who understood it, obeyed a different kind of math than the kind printed on a finance sheet. Vera put the old D6 in her shed at the end of the season, changed the oils, greased the pins, and adjusted what needed adjusting. She did not restore it. The crawler kept its patched hoses, its scarred blade, its hard-won ugliness. A machine does not need beauty to be honest. On the last cool evening before winter settled in for good, she stood in the open shed door and looked at it in the fading light. It was still the same machine half the county had laughed at. Rust on the hood, welds on the blade, years all over it. But it had cut 11 miles of line, saved grass, and proved something most people forget the moment a surface looks hopeless. Time is not the same thing as ruin, and the people worth trusting are usually the ones patient enough to know the difference.